Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Chris,
I'm Carvel.
I'm Matt.
and we are the We Have Issues podcast. Today, we will be discussing Obergefell versus Hodges and gay marriage in general, and how that relates to the ASP's platform and our own kind of personal opinions on the matter. Matt, would you like to tell us kind of what Obergefell versus Hodges is all about, and what is what's why this has become such an issue recently?
Oh yeah, let's have a gay old time of it. Obergefell is basically the it's the Supreme Court case. It didn't just come about independently. I know it's a kind of a conglomeration of multiple cases that kind of culminated into that one case, but that's basically what started, the gay marriage, the right to gay marriage. Um,
So, what specifically is bringing this about is in recently this past week, Kim Davis has made an appeal to the Supreme Court to overturn Obergefell versus Hodges. She, for those who don't know, uh, basically right after gay marriage was made legal in 2015 with the Supreme Court ruling, she was a county clerk in my home state of Kentucky, Rowan County, where she refused to uh, register a same-sex marriage, citing religious principles. And she ended up being jailed for a couple days for it. She's subject to huge fines still over that, and she is trying to say that forcing her to approve of a same-sex marriage was a violation of her religious principles, and that it shouldn't. The whole premise of Obergefell versus Hodges shouldn't exist, and that it should just be overturned. Um, you know, kind of Carvel. How has how have you seen this whole gay marriage situation evolve? Over the past 20 years or so.
Yeah, this is really funny. The how I perceive, the country has been changing extremely fast. Sometimes faster than what people want. And so when this happened in 2015, it was kind of on. It was kind of something that a lot of us could foresee happening because of a lot of the policies that had already been placed either in California, Colorado, Michigan, whatever. Because let's not forget there were some states that legalized it before
Oh.
the country did.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is something kind of that did not come out of nowhere. It wasn't a big surprise. But we have to remember too, when Obama was in office, he kind of led a more liberal state. People leaned, I should say, the country and our policies were a little bit more left leaning. Now, with Trump being in office, it's a little bit more right leaning. And so we're at a point where this actually could overturn. It is very possible, in my perception. And right now, I'm kind of taking the position as I usually do. I probably mentioned before on the podcast as a spectator, um, because it's kind of the state of the country and what we look like right now to ourselves, right? And right now, we're pretty much conservatively leaning more so than we were during Obama's presidency. So, as far as the ASP and how we perceive these things, um, we're all different, right? My personal position is that I'm not necessarily, I'm a Christian man of a non-denominational faith, and So with our non-denomination, with my non-denominational faith, um, gay marriage is not part of my belief. Uh, it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't like gay people. I don't interact with gay people, but it's more so my understanding and belief with God is that marriage is between a man and a woman. I don't know. We all have different perspectives. How about you, Chris, Matt? What do you guys think?
Well, as you stated, the country kind of leans toward where its president is. Obama, we were more left and we're more in the right lane now. But what about, I feel like there's probably plenty of us that feel like we, uh, I don't want to use this word because it's more confrontational, but I'll use it, betrayed. So when, gay marriage was legalized across the country, I was, at that point in my life, I probably leaned more conservative, but on this issue, I was very liberal. I had a lot of gay friends, some of them very close with, and the kind of the conservative argument then was, well, what's the next step after we legalize this? It's going to be teaching, gay sex to kids in schools, and when does it get into the realm of pedophilia? And I was like, that's absolutely stupid. This is between two consenting adults in their own home. Absolutely not. And so that was kind of my premise behind the whole thing. And now here we are, where you have books that basically they've tried to put in schools that do have gay porn. There's, these of course are fringe movements. I do realize that, but you have people in the psychological community who want to kind of redefine what pedophilia is. They want to use terms like MAP, minor attracted people, and so how I see it is the slippery slope that I was warned about. That's actually how the direction everything ended up taking. So now I have to go back and I have to reevaluate what I supported and the premise that I supported it under. And I have to admit that, I might have been wrong because it has trended more in the direction that the Republicans at the time told me that it was going to go. And so it's not necessarily an issue of just the cult of personality of your president, I don't think. I think it's conservatives are now seeing this wasn't part of the deal. I think classical liberals are now starting to see that this went in a direction we did not anticipate, and this has opened up, pathways that we did not want to open up.
Matt, you got a really great point. I like that that you're mentioning that it's going down a path that we weren't expecting, right? For an example, I know that I've told a couple people this, but I remember when I work out at Planet Fitness, and
Mm-hmm.
when I go into Planet Fitness, sometimes I get a sweat on, sometimes I'm far away from home, and I go in there and take a shower. And I remember there was one particular time when there were two guys inside the Planet Fitness, and when I was there taking a shower, came back, and I'm at my locker, and they kept on looking over at me, and I didn't really quite understand. Like, I'm like, what do they keep on looking over at me for, And I'm like, at this point, I'm a little bit protective, So, I go into shower, change, come back, because usually you go to the locker room and change and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You're at the locker and change. And when I walked past them, both of them, they were actually females. And that was one of those things that was like, this wasn't anticipated, and stuff. And the fact that they kept on looking like towards my direction, I don't know, maybe to play peekaboo, who knows, but the fact they were looking over to my direction and stuff, and me being the only black guy in the locker room, that was kind of something that kind of made me feel a little awkward and strange and stuff. And that's something that, as you mentioned, we didn't anticipate this. We didn't see this coming, and stuff. And it happens more on the reverse side, where you have, with these laws, with gay marriage, they extend to the LGBT community and more rights, where we see like people who were born male walk into female locker rooms, and we don't quite understand their mental capacity. We don't understand what their intentions are. We don't understand why they're doing it, and then we're teaching children to do that. This is okay, and this is kind of going on to what we spoke on earlier. Is that when we're teaching, what are we teaching our children inside these schools, right? What are they learning? Because allowing kids to just see anything and think it's okay just because it's popular doesn't make it right.
Yeah, definitely. And good on you for bringing up specifically in schools because I can think of an issue. I worked kind of within the school system for a brief period of time, and one of the cases was they had a student who had transferred from out of state from another school, and he apparently had rape charges that followed along with him. The school wasn't aware of these. They wouldn't have admitted him into this new school if they had known about this. And one of the first things he did when he got to this new school was he started to claim that he was trans and was wearing women's clothing to school. And one of the teachers kind of confided in the meeting that we're in and said, well, you know where this is headed, right? He's wanting to go into the girls' locker room and he's got rape charges on him. And to me, that just sets off a storm that need not even be an issue normally of how do we tiptoe around this because we don't want to infringe on his rights and tell him he's not trans. But at the same time, we have to protect the other students. And that's the issue. The biggest issue with this is that's the reason you have a community that started off, as LGB. Now it's LGBT and plus Q and everything else that they've added. And that's the fluid dynamics of the whole thing. That's what makes this very difficult to pin down is how do you protect everybody involved, both parties. If one day you can be a man, one day you can be a woman, one day you can change your basically what age you perceive yourself to be. There's even people who have gotten into being transracial. It just becomes a very convoluted mess, and with all the problems we have going on in the world, it's not something that we need one more thing we need to put on the plate right now.
I think, Matt. I think this is something that kind of muddles the issue of gay marriage a lot, right? Like because like as you said, the whole like LGB movement has been kind of forced into this LGBTQ plus movement now. They're tied at the hip right now, right? And I know from my personal experience, there's a lot of I guess more orthodox gay people who are kind of against, like they're usually older, they were more more established, in the older gay communities, where they look at with some suspicion on this T involvement in that, and that's kind of and I think it's kind of like a sort of woke fatigue situation where we've been progressive ever and more progressive over time, and we've reached a point where it's like, well, now gay marriage is associated with pornography in grade schools, and that I know very, very, very many gay people who would be completely aghast at that assertion, but it's here, because we've been dialing up the notch, every year one more just to see what we can get away with. And I know you brought up the like the age of consent movement in France, with like Sartre and Foucault, and how they were trying to redefine, like through psychology, like what is what is acceptable sexuality, when can children consent, that sort of situation, and like I think that isn't tied to this issue, right? Like it's kind of a related but separate issue when it comes to gender and sexual minorities and that kind of thing. but that whole movement though kind of was in line with the NAMBLA movement in the U.S., which it was big during like that confusing 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s period where everybody was countercultural, and it kind of died on its own almost as people realized we've kind of had enough with this. And they reference it more and more nowadays because I feel like that's where we are now. We're kind of in a new countercultural movement. A lot of times, though, this countercultural isn't really against the sexual mores, the gender identity, of like what is a woman, like who is a woman, like are you a housewife, are you an independent woman, like that was what the counterculture was back in the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. Now our counterculture is more of an economic bent, where you to be countercultural, you are opposing the U.S. international policy. You're opposing the traditional economic systems, and now that's tying in with all this that's where the progressivism is going, and queer theory is tied in with all that, and we're moving on in that direction. Does that kind of make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it does. And I actually have a question for you guys, because I think the bigger part of this is going to be focused on kids, and how kids learn and what kids are allowed to do. For an example, we're looking at the civil rights lens, right? Mm-hmm. And the stress that denying LGBTQ children the right to live authentically, and how they can express their identity is a civil rights issue. And that's something that we're looking in a lens that we've never seen before, right? It's always been a particular race looking for civil rights, particular age, a disability, someone that is, not of the same stature as the population. But children, how much freedom are they allowed? And when do we stop allowing these kids, these children, to express their identity if it comes to that?
I don't think there's any issue with kids not being able to express their identity. So I was bullied in elementary school mercilessly for being gay. I was not gay, but I was I was a nerdy kind of, sissified kid. And so I was bullied, for that reason all through elementary school. And the way I was brought up, I've mentioned this before, we were kind of a traditionally liberal household, and we were Christian, so it was kind of like, my parents instilled in me, it was my mission to be friends with kids that other kids wouldn't be friends with, kind of the outsiders. And turns out that many of the kids that I was friends with in elementary school, middle school, a lot of them did turn out to be gay. And so, and a lot of them became quite successful. They did quite well. I'm sure once they kind of got, puberty hit and clearly to them something was different, I'm sure it became a little bit more of an issue. So, yeah, I mean, I was friends with, a lot of kids that ended up being gay, and a lot of them very successful. One of them, interestingly, he became a pastor and turned away from the lifestyle, and he kind of goes around and preaches on that and things like that. So I don't think I think we've made way too big of an issue, way too big of a deal out of how are kids going to function in the world if they're not, and I don't even think you have to like cultivate that identity. If you're gay, it's just, they just kind of go on, and once, like I said, puberty hits, they kind of start to straighten that out themselves. I don't think there's anything there that needs to be nurtured. Even from the straight side of things, I never had anybody explain to me my straightness or explain to me how to be straight. And so I don't see an issue with just letting a kid develop, and once you kind of know where they're going to fall, then you can offer some kind of support in that way. So I don't think that's the issue so much, with the kids. I think it's the issue of the fruit that we saw with legalizing gay marriage. I think we all kind of had this idea, and I think the overwhelming support that the numbers have been for gay marriage kind of demonstrate this. I think we all had this idea that if we let gay people get married, there was going to be, out in the suburbs, white picket fences everywhere, and the happy gay couple every other house, and it was going to be just like everybody else was. But that's not what we saw. We saw people running around in the streets waving giant purple dildos around in the air. We've seen this weird literature make its way into school. We've seen these weird things that are getting forced into the culture. I just started watching a show the other night where they had very young female character in the show, probably meant to be about 12 or 13, and like they instantly force her into this gay relationship. Just feels very unnatural and very forced. And so, being Christians, that's how I think we judge things are what fruit is produced from this. And I think that the gay marriage did not turn out the way we thought. I think it emboldened a community that was already on its way to being too bold as it was. And so I think that's why we're starting to see the support slip now.
My question for you guys, since you bring up, like we thought we were going to have that happy gay couple, do you think that happy gay couple does exist in the suburbs? Do you think that that's the common situation for these gay couples that have entered into marriage? And, do you think that we really should be judging the sins of a few, the purple dildo wavers? Should we be judging the entire gay community based on the worst elements of that demographic? And do you think that should affect whether Obergefell versus Hodges it should exist, or should be repealed?
Well, looking at it from a Christian standpoint, all of it kind of falls into a no-go aspect for me. Where it's kind of deemed as something that is not exactly how God intended us to live. That's for me and how I perceive things. However, there is another point that has been talked about, and we're currently talking about, is what you mentioned, Chris, is like there is that white picket fence gay couple, and then there's those ones having dildos in the streets, and putting stickers everywhere, and yeah, they're taking away. Also, they're taking away from the image that that we had originally perceived when gay marriage was going to be legalized. Mm-hmm. And what's happening now is that I'm seeing young adults that wouldn't necessarily would have been gay, but are now like bi and testing whatever. And there's more gay people nowadays than there has ever been, like in the history of, the world, pretty much. And that has a lot to do with the welcoming of it and the teaching of, gay sex, gay marriage.
It's a social contagion.
Yes. Yeah, there we go.
That's a good
lack
word.
of better word.
I love that word.
Yeah.
I wanted to bring this up too, not to interject too much, but you said like more and more people are identifying as gay. Gen Z adults, I just looked this up because I honestly find this number to be just ridiculous, from my own personal experience growing up, but for Gen Z, let's see here. It was Gen Z adults aged 18 to 25. 15% of them identify as bisexual, 5% as gay or lesbian, and 8% as not straight. You know, so only 72% of Gen Z, Gen Z adults, young adults, identify as straight. So that means that, if these trends persist, we're obviously going. That's many millions more, LGBT people that will be looking to get married, and like we'll be wanting to get married in the future. Hopefully, because that's just the natural, thing of humanity, is we want to partner up, we want to have these lifelong commitments. So this issue is, like you said, it's a future issue, and
Right.
and I don't know where that's going to lead in the next 10, 20 years.
Well, I'm a fan of just getting government completely out of it, period. To me, marriage has always been a religious institution, and especially in Western culture. It's based on Christianity and kind of what God set forth. And so I don't know why, to me, it's completely asinine that you actually have to go to a courthouse and you have to get a license to get married. In my perfect world, how we would approach it would be completely eliminate government from it. If you want to get married, it is a religious ceremony, and that's held in the religious setting of your choosing. And however, whoever wants to recognize that can recognize that. If you want to go to a church that would recognize gay marriage, then fine, they can recognize it. My church over here won't. And just let it kind of be that way. Now that kind of gets into a whole issue of your tax benefits and things like that. If you have health issues, registering somebody as a spouse, for that, I would say then you could go to the government and you could register for kind of like a universal, what do they call it?
Civil union.
Civil union. Thank you, civil union. And that would be your way into that. Otherwise, the marriage would simply be a religious ceremony, and that would be how we went about that. Because, like in the case of Kim Davis, she has more protection, in my opinion, under the Constitution than the people registering to get married. There's no guarantee for marriage in the Constitution. If there were, every incel out there could go out and like club a wife over the head and be like, "Look, it's Constitution. I can get married." So she's more protected. Her religious freedoms are more protected than gay marriage. There is no guarantee of marriage in the Constitution, and I do think we need to define it some way in the context of our Western culture, because there are other cultures that have marriage ceremonies, some kind of union ceremonies, but none that are like ours. Marriage in the Christian Western context is joining of a man and a woman to be life partners, and ideally for procreation, for children. And that's supposed to be a union that keeps a family unit together. Really, when you get right down to it, love has very little to do with it. And that's kind of the basis for gay marriage. We should be able to get married because we love each other. Honestly, marriage isn't predicated on that. There were marriages in the Bible where there was not love. It was Leah and Rachel, and who was that? Jacob, forgive me. Jacob, right, yeah. I mean, it was Rachel that he wanted, but it was Leah that he ended up with at first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, so there we go. Yeah, so I mean, even basing it strictly off of love, that's not what it's about. Now, granted, if you're going to support somebody like that and you're going to tether yourself, through children with them, you probably ought to love them. So that's kind of how I would like to see the direction of it go.
I think that if we look at marriage historically, because that's kind of the argument, like that whole marriage should be religious thing. A lot of secularists, they like to point to historically, if we go back to the origins of Western marriage, that was like Roman property law, civil marriage. The Roman state and the Roman, religion were kind of intertwined with each other. But ostensibly, we get our, modern legal constructions from Roman law. And their argument is, because that marriage was that way, it should be that way nowadays, where it is recognized by the state because, like we said, the Roman state recognized it. But at the same point, we kind of don't actually get our, concept of marriage from that ancient Roman law, because we had the whole Middle Ages and the whole Christian Europe that existed for 1,000 years between that and our modern conception of marriage. So marriage is a religious institution. It just is. That's how it's been for 1,000 years.
Well, and you bring up an interesting point on that too. I'll briefly interject there. So there are other cultures that aren't intertwined with Christianity, that have had some kind of unification ceremonies for families. But like you're saying, it kind of verges into that property thing. And if I was a secularist, I would probably want to point at those more than biblical marriage. It would suit my fancy better. But the issue with some of these other cultures, these ceremonies were more, it was truly like property. It was less about keeping together a family structure. It was more about the man having ownership over a woman. So it's kind of self-defeating to call upon those other institutions.
Personally, I'm kind of agreeing with you, Matt. On a personal level, I think that marriage should just be a religious institution, because there's lots of different religions out there. There's lots of different ideas of what marriage is. Again, they'll say, marriage isn't tied to the one man, one woman, because all these different beliefs. Some in Islam, a man can have up to 4 wives.
Mm-hmm.
Who would want that headache? I'm just saying. Who would want that headache?
In certain societies in Nepal, one woman marries a man and all his brothers. In our modern secular culture, the concept of thruples and polycules, where a bunch of different individuals interact in a relationship dynamics that are unique, that exists. And who is the government to say whether that is any less or more valid? I have kind of an anecdotal statement on that, where the government kind of recognizes, like a polygamous kind of relationship. I had a coworker who has a child who is, who's an adult, who is in a, in like a polyandrous relationship with a few other people, and they have children with one of the people in the throuple, whatever. The non-parent individual was always invited to these court hearings because it is part of the child's family unit. And that's like a court in Kentucky almost giving tacit recognition to that sort of arrangement, even though it's not, none of them are legally married to each other, but they recognize it as a de facto relationship, which again, ties into this whole, we could just allow any belief system of relationship, let the individuals define their own relationship. The state only cares about property rights and inheritance rights. And, I kind of feel like we should have that, without the implication that someone is in a romantic or sexual relationship. I mean, wouldn't it be great if, you had a roommate who's been your friend for 10 years, who gets a job, has excellent health care, you're in between jobs. Wouldn't you love to get some health care via them? As the civil partnership, because you are sharing in a homestead together.
That's an interesting point. I never thought about that.
Would that, or like you would get a tax benefit to help, you get established, so that, you could run your household better or something like that.
Interesting, yeah.
That's kind of off the wall thinking right now, but I mean,
no, not really.
I think that would help ease this whole idea of gay marriage, like make it more palatable to everyone, where it that we don't state doesn't recognize marriage anymore at all, but it does recognize all these things that we recognize are necessary for.
I think though I think that the more we explore in these kind of ideologies, the more corruption we will encounter. All right, yeah. So this leaves a lot of opportunities for, let's say for an example, two businessmen, right? One who lost millions of dollars that year, another one who has gained $1 million that year, right? So you can write all that off, right? Because if you file jointly, and that's a way to kind of cheat the system, unless I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong.
But that sort of stuff already happens in sham marriages that happen all the time. I mean, you can just look at, for instance, a lot of military marriages where all of a sudden, these 18, 20-year-old guys, they just happen to get married and now they get to live off base. Their partner gets to have, free health care, and those marriages a lot of times just fall apart because they weren't entered into for good reasons. So like it's kind of hard to police that kind of marriage fraud situation.
Well, okay, so like this is kind of a little bit off topic to where I want to be, but like let's just say that you got a businessman, right? Who they make an agreement or a pact, right? That hey, if you lose money this year and I make a lot of money, we're going to get married halfway through the year. And then we're going to divorce the very next year. And there's no rule of how many times you can get married or how many times you can divorce. Yes. Correct?
Yes.
So that is definitely something that probably the most unethical of us all would be willing to do.
We say this, but like
and that's an extreme. But
we're kind of developing kind of a fantasy anyway right now, right? Because we while we say like on an idealistic level, government should be out of marriage, or people might abuse this kind of situation. We have like a real world, like this is never going to happen, because people do have their preconceived notions about what marriage is. Society kind of dictates what it is, and they want marriage to be this government recognized, property rights, family building, and enterprise, and that's kind of the world we live in now. So while that was a fun thought experiment, I kind of think we need to draw our focus back to marriage as it exists now. And is there a good non-religious reason that you guys think that we should restrict gay people from getting married?
I would say yes. It's just we've actually have the experiment played out in front of us. We see the results. It has not been good for family. It's not been good for individuals. It has emboldened people with mental illness to branch out and demand more quote unquote rights. It's causing headaches now, as we see, like if we were to take government out of it, this Kim Davis thing wouldn't be an issue. They could have they would have went somewhere else and gotten their marriage recognized wherever due, and there would be no court issue here. We wouldn't be trying to overturn anything. We just see it playing out in our culture and society. We see the results of it. Not to say that there isn't straight perverts and deviants out there. There's more than plenty of them, but you see people running around in the streets at these gay pride festivals. You see entire, government institutions actually taking preference in the form of gay marriage. You can look at your local library. Now, luckily, I don't think that our library here does it. They may, but during Pride Month, you have libraries that promote, Gay Pride Month. And so to me, I'm like, well, the government's actually taking taking a side in this whole issue, and it's just become very convoluted. It's not been there's been no benefit to society from it. It's harmed numerous families, numerous kids. You see, there's been several instances in the past year of gay couples who have adopted children and ended up, harming those children. And so, yeah, I don't think there's any issue at all. I don't know why somebody who feels rejected by religion, does not like Christianity, usually as kind of a majority of them, why they want to participate in something that originally was a religious ceremony.
You brought up an interesting topic on Pride Month in public libraries. I know that that's a kind of that's kind of a that's a reoccurring issue that occurs within the American Solidarity Party with its members. One of the offices that its members like to run as are library board seats.
Yeah.
I know. For instance, our last vice presidential candidate, Lauren Onak, she recently ran for
Hmm.
her library board, and I believe, if I recall correctly, that was one of the sticking points, was that she saw that they kept promoting LGBT materials during Pride Month, and kind of wanted to like maybe make it not as much of a presence, or maybe.
Yeah, and that's my thing. Like full disclosure, like fine if you want to have those books. I'm completely fine with them being in the library. That's not my issue. Put them in, you can even have your own like LGBT section. I don't care about that. It's the promotion of it that I
Yes.
have the issue with.
Yes.
Yes, yeah, it is, and especially who we're promoting it to, and kind of one of those. I forgot that terminology you use. Social,
Contagion.
uh,
Social
social contagious.
contagion.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah, social contagious. Because as we know, statistics what Chris was talking about before, 15% of people identify as bi, and there's more and more, you know, uh, gay, lesbian than there has ever been, and that's something that's not by accident. That is something that
Right.
we are teaching, and we're teaching our children, and we're teaching people just like how you can teach people that you should not be racist and you should accept all ethnicities. Same things you can teach. It's the same concept you can teach people to want to be bisexual or want to be a transgender or think it's okay to um, uh, uh, forms of pedophilia. This is a lot of this is taught and can be taught, and we've seen it. We've seen it over time. For an example, we see it a lot in music. In music, we seen those cool videos. How many of us wanted to go to Cancun, for MTV, right? When we were younger, it's because it's what we saw when we glamorized and we thought was like, wow, this is cool. And now, when when the millennials became like in their 20s, they're all going on spring breaks, and it's because it was, you know, something that we taught that we were taught that was really cool. I'm kind of jumping a little bit off the topic, but I'm trying to bring it back where, like, all these things are taught. Anything that we deem as okay, and you are advertising it, people are going to listen to those advertisements. People are going to say, hey, this is okay. Or, hey, I want to try this. So this is not a big deal. And this changes culture. We have to be very careful on how we change culture, because not only is our hearts, our internal hearts, and the very fabric of who we are being changed, but how God perceives us as mankind. And that's important.
Well, and we have to be careful though in culture because gay people exist. They're here. They're not going anywhere, and we have to include them. We can't just act like they don't exist. But like you're saying, Carvel, there's a difference between just existing in culture and changing culture. And going back, earlier I used the example of the TV show having the gay characters. There's, when people call something woke and people are like, oh, well, what is woke? There's a very big difference. Like there were shows I grew up where there were gay characters. And even recently, I don't know, have you guys ever watched Clarence? It was an older cartoon that came on Cartoon Network. Um, Adam Goldberg was the voice of one of the characters, and in this cartoon, he lived with two moms. Um, and one of my favorite shows is Superstore. Several gay characters in Superstore, but it's very natural. It's just they're just there, and they mesh well. But then again, you see other shows where it's like, "Hey, look, here's the gay character. See the gay character, y'all." And that's where it's like, why is it? If this is something natural, if this is something that just happens, and you're not trying to influence culture, why? Because nobody's running around. Look at all the straight people, And so that Oscar in The Office, that was a good example. I mean, we ran through like 7 seasons before there was really flamboyant gay Oscar. And so yeah, that's what I don't understand is why can't we just let gay people exist alongside everybody? Why is it something that has to come to the forefront of everything?
So I think gay people's response to that would be we do just want to exist beside everyone else, and we just want to have the same rights that everyone else has. We want to be able to have the right to enter into a lifelong partnership with the person that we love. And we don't see why that is such a controversial opinion to hold and why we should be restricted from that.
But the issue there is nobody has that right technically.
Mm. Well, we're not going by Mosaic
no one
laws.
might have that right, but that right seems to be given an awful lot more freely to a straight couple than to a gay couple.
Well, we're not going by Mosaic laws anymore, where we're just stoning people for sleeping with another, two guys sleeping in the bed, right? But kind of what's going on right now is that we have a culture set, right, where I'm not trying to influence you to believe everything I want that I'm doing, right? And I cannot watch a Netflix show these days anymore where somewhere in the season out of nowhere 2 men are kissing. And it's kind of like one of those things that's like, okay, well, like what was the significance of these 2 guys kissing in the show? It's kind of out of nowhere, and stuff. I don't even like love stories anyway when I'm watching an action movie. Now, and a lot of dudes don't, Like if I'm watching a Marvel movie, like the closest thing I ever seen was like Hulk and what's her name? Black Widow, like touch hands and stuff. And even then I'm like, man, I just want to see them fight and stuff blow up,
I don't know, man. Thor, Love and Thunder, that was the gayest thing I've
Love
ever
and
seen.
Thunder. All right. Well, yeah, Love and Thunder is the exception. I forgot all about that.
Geez.
But I mean, like why do I don't want to just see I don't want to see 2 people kissing out of nowhere, but why are you showing me to influence me in some way or some aspect or to advertise to me about 2 gay people kissing? I don't know. I just don't care to see it. And I think a lot of us are like that.
Carvel, I'll bring something else up to you, and I'm pretty sure you've expected this, but you say I don't want to see that. Now, 40, 50 years ago, we had situations where interracial couples were being restricted, and you had a lot of people going, a black guy kissing a white woman, I don't want to see that. So what's your take on, gay people comparing their situation to, that situation and comparing their struggle
Big difference.
to that
Well, to tell you,
the civil rights movement?
Well,
Big
to tell
difference.
you, it's probably not fair looking at the Christian aspect of it, right? But I look at a lot of things in a Christian aspect where it's like the Lord never said anything against Moses when he
Hmm.
dated someone out of his, you know,
Zipporah, I believe her name is.
race.
Hmm.
Yeah, or never, or I could be wrong, but I think Abraham too. But anyways, it's a male and a female. That's the very basic, right?
Yep.
Uh, a male and a female, and more so, a believing male and female. That's my whole basic of it. Now, if it wasn't that, then I would say, yeah, I won't ever marry someone outside my race. I won't ever think this is okay. But that is not the criteria that God gave us.
Yep.
And if it was the criteria that God gave us, we interracial couples wouldn't be able to have children, wouldn't be able to thrive in an environment that we live in. So, but even then, with the whole interracial couples or any couples, it's like if I don't like men, especially men, we don't watch those love stories. We're not interested in watching those romantic movies. We like we like a good mystery. Some of us like anime. Some of us like action. Some of us like the sci-fi. We want a good story. We don't want one where it's just like, is this what we're doing now? And why is this being advertised to me? Like, if if you guys are doing whatever you want behind closed door, I'm not going to say that's my business. That's none of my business. But if you're pushing this not only on me, not only on my children, but in society, that's where I draw the line. That's not okay. And if you don't like in a relation in a relation couples in a relational couples, well, I mean, you don't have to watch those movies, and I hope that's not even being pushed on you. And it is sometimes, but I mean, I'm not okay with it. Like people just pushing these ideology on people,
Well,
not
it's
even
it's
Christianity.
it's how it's being pushed. I mean, I'm probably more liberal than you on that, Carvel, because I don't mind seeing the gay characters, and it's not even something that I would mind having to, explain to my kids if they saw that on TV. And I hate to be this way because it's not objective, but there was the Supreme Court justice when they asked, well, what's pornography? And he says, well, I know it when I see it. And I can't remember who it was. I want to say Cooper or something like that, but that's not right. But anyways, and it's kind of the same thing. So, like I was saying earlier, there's sometimes you see gay people on TV and you think nothing of it. I mean, some of my favorite shows have had gay characters. Some of my favorite characters have been gay characters. But then there's also the gay character where you're like, they want me to know that's a gay character and they want me to think about the gay character. And it's just hard to explain. You can just feel in your spirit and in your emotions the natural flow of this works, this is just part of the story, and then
Well,
there's
Matt,
this is
I just want
influencing
to I just want
culture.
to make one just small little like correction. I do not mind at all seeing gay people on the screen. I do
Okay.
not mind, and I think they do bring some pretty, sometimes some pretty fun flavor to the shows or movies you're watching. It's just their agenda being pushed on you.
Right.
It's kind of like what you were exactly describing, Matt. Like it's sometimes like you see. I know a lot of gay people, throughout my life, and sometimes they have um, this comedic like they're like a comedian in
Oh,
some
they're some
sense.
of the funniest people in the
Yeah, and
world.
they're some of the funniest people in the world and stuff, and they have these perspective, which is and they interact with cultures, right? And they're one of those that you can probably, if your wife says, "Hey, there's this guy, he wants to go shopping with me," and you know that he's gay and he's never gonna, you might be like, okay, yeah, sure. It's you're not threatened or whatever and stuff. but it's just the whole advertisement of it, and
Right.
and being pushed on a lot of people who feel like, hey, uh, maybe I should try this. Maybe it's not a bad idea. Maybe I should be more accepting to this. And
And
people actually think like that.
that's something I think about a lot. Going back to my earlier story, and I can flesh that out and go real deep into it, but I won't for the sake of brevity. But growing up the way I was, like I said, I was a very feminine, kind of sissified kid, and I was made fun of for being gay. And I'm like, if that had happened now, and kind of maybe not in the South so much, but anywhere else, if that had happened now, there would have been a teacher, a counselor, somebody would have gotten a hold of me and would have immediately started putting ideas in my head, and there's no telling where that would have went. And that's what's scary to me is how, like you're saying, Carvel, with this stranglehold it seems to have on culture, how many kids like me just, are a little just kind of, little sissified, and there's adults that are coming in here and really using that as an opportunity. And again, just legalizing the marriage thing, I think that's just emboldened a very already bold culture, and that's why I kind of like the ASP's stance on cleaning up marriage. And it's not just going after gay people in the ASP platform. The ASP wants to get rid of no fault divorce, which I would say is probably just as bad, if not worse, to the institution of religious marriage as gay marriage was.
Guys, I think on that note, I think we have a lot more to say on this subject. I think this kind of warrants a part 2 of this video, so that we will continue this discussion. But I think we've run a little long enough for this episode. So if you guys are all right with it, thank you all for listening, for watching. We truly appreciate you. Make sure you subscribe, comment, like, do all that fun stuff. Promote us as much as you can. We want to get our voice out and let everyone hear us. And with that, thank you for listening. I'm Chris.
I'm
Matt?
Carvel.
And God bless, and thank you all for listening.